Hey guys, were you wondering if we were ever coming back? Well, here we are. Okay, so this time around, it's just gonna be me. Liberty's got a lot going on with her awesome setup there in Alaska with her coffee shop and stuff, so she won't be in this video. Um, but we're hoping to get her on some other ones to do some co-hosting with us. So, today we have Terria Vandenhuerk, whose story is amazing. She has been in prison. She has dealt with a drug addiction. She's had a son who was murdered. She's just all kinds of things. I don't want to tell her whole story because she can do that. But I did want to let you guys know that we now are back on, and we're excited. We have quite a few parts from this interview with Terria, and so we'll probably have parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. But yeah, let's get started. And thank you so much for watching. Please, if this is an interest to you, please hit the subscribe button. And if you hit the little bell on there, you will get all the notifications for our next videos coming up. I have lined up some awesome interviews with people who have been in the prison system in Alaska and what their life is now, what their life was then, coming up in other videos. So yes, we are back, we are here, and we have short stories to share. So thank you very much, and let's get going. Hey everyone, I know it has been a while. We've been on here, but I today have an amazing guest on here that is allowed me to interview her and so graciously come on here. Her name is Terria Vandenhuerk, and she has an amazing story that I want to share with you guys. Well, I want her to share with you guys because it's incredible. We met, I believe, did you come into the prison and that's where we actually met?
Yeah, I visited several times Spring Creek and was, participating in some of the restorative justice groups that some of the guys had going on. And then I believe I met your wife in the reentry pod. She's a little tiny lady.
Yes.
Really, really pretty.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think, yeah. I met her in there and had conversations with her. But yeah, so I believe it was in Spring Creek, but I really didn't get to know you until after, you guys ended up leaving and, kind of seeing what you were doing out here, making noise.
Making noise. Yes, yes. Well, I would love it if you would, in a nutshell, just kind of share with us your journey, how you got to where you are, and yeah, just that for everyone so they kind of know where you're coming from.
Okay. Well, I am a formerly incarcerated woman. I've been in and out. I was in and out of the system since I was a kid. So foster care, group homes, juvenile detention, and then adult prison. So basically I was a ward of the state since I was 11 years old, starting in 1984. So, and then, I struggled with addiction. I was part of when the OxyContin era came out in the mid 90s, I got hooked on that from prescriptions, and my addiction just totally steamrolled. But I also like dabbled in drugs prior to that, just because, I grew up around drugs in my own home, my own family, a lot of trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, which was the reason why I got removed from my parents' house. And when I started using drugs heavily, I was like, oh, this feels good. I don't have to deal with my stuff. And so I continued to use. And of course, addiction is just progressive. I start out taking the pills, and then I started snorting them, and then that wasn't enough. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to try shooting them, because I knew people were shooting them. And then once I did that, and then I found out heroin was cheaper, so I started getting heroin, and it just continued to steamroll. I didn't want to be the way that I was. But I kind of did. So I was like in this like in between of like, I still wanted to get high, but I didn't want to be the way that I was. I hated my addiction. You know, I'd always believed in God, and I'd always pray, just take this addiction away from me. And of course, me not really knowing how God works, like he's not going to just pluck us, you know. We got to go through these trials so that we can come out and see how he really works, and we learn from, you know, through these processes. So 2004, I was on methadone, 210 milligrams. I hated it. I didn't want to be on that. I kept begging my doctors, please take me off. And no, they told me I needed to be on, you know, medication for the rest of my life. But then I ended up, you know, talking to my ex-husband. He's like, well, you know, meth will help you get off of it, and it'll help you get through the detox. And I was like, well, okay, I'll just use meth for a couple of weeks while I get through the detox, and then I'll just, you know, get sober. But that's not how you know, if you have an addictive personality, that's not how addiction works. And I ended up started using meth, and within 8 months, I was being arrested for manufacturing. And my son, he was a teenager at the time, 13. He was in the dwelling that I was cooking the meth with. And then eventually I started using drugs with him. And then, you know, I was arrested twice for manufacturing, once when I was out on bail. And then they really got me. And this was in April 2nd, 2005, I was arrested after being in a high-speed chase from the DEA that was actually looking for me. They'd put in, you know, a search out, and we were all over the news. And I really understand the magnitude of what was going on. I was kind of flippant, you know, had a real like rebellious attitude. I was just turned 32 years old and weighed about 120 pounds, and just had a real big like attitude and believed that I knew it all, you know. And my son at the time was in treatment, or he was in the hospital getting some treatment, and just really not having a really, you know, big care about how my life had just spiraled out of control. Once I got sober and I like started realizing, you know, having some clarity, I started picking up, and mind you, let me rewind for a second. I'd always read the Bible, and I'd read stories and listen to sermons while I was high. I would like, you know, listen to testimonies and stuff, and desperately really wanted to get clean. And I prayed for that as I was putting a pipe to my mouth, you know. And 2 days after that prayer, my bus was raided because I was cooking meth in a bus out in Big Lake. And my prayer was answered, just not in a way that I had expected. You know, I thought that I was just going to get plucked out of my addiction, and it just wasn't working that way, like I said earlier, you know. So, you know, once I sobered up, I started like really, you know, while I was going through the courts and stuff, I just really like started reading, you know, getting into the Bible, and, you know, going to church, and then also got a job at Highland as the lead education assistant. And then I started realizing things about myself that I, you know, just really never paid attention to. I started understanding about trauma. I started understanding about that I wasn't stupid. You know, I'd always believed that I was stupid. And here I am like teaching other women how to, you know, get their GED. And then advocating for, you know, a Christian program to come to Highland, you know, all these things. And then eventually I ended up going to RSAT after I was sentenced. I was sentenced in 2007 to 20 years. with 8 suspended. And so I had 12 years to serve, and I was like, well, I'm going to make use of my time. But I had a lot of peace with that. I wasn't like feeling like, oh my gosh, I got this long sentence. I was at peace because I was ready to change my life. And I saw it as my situation as an answer to prayer. Even though I didn't like it, I was like going to make use of my time because I was in and out, in and out, in and out. And I did not want to do that anymore. And I had a lot of remorse for, my putting my son through, what I put him through. When I had him, I was an addict. And here I am, like dragging my son along in my addiction and struggling to, be a parent, but also living as an addict. And so I really worked hard, gave my son opportunity. He'd come and visit me. I'd allow him to tell me, I had my own, what I would call today, a restorative justice circle with my son when he was 16 and I was in treatment, and I allowed him, I said, don't hold back. I really need you to just tell me how you feel and, talk about experiences that you had and even be specific. And I'm just here to sit here and listen to what you have to say. And I don't want you to be afraid to tell me how you feel or what you want to say for what you want to see for the future when I do get out. And he didn't hold back. I made sure I wrote what he was saying down. Told me I made him feel like a ghost. He was embarrassed, about what I did because I was an escort. My son knew that, and I was a dancer and all those things, and he didn't want to tell people that I did that. And then he also, told me how I made him feel when I was doing drugs because he knew, and he told me a story. I remember one specific story that he told me. He's like, Mom, when you were, doing drugs and you'd have people over all the time and you'd nod out or pass out, I was always afraid that somebody was going to sexually assault you. And he said, he goes, I remember being 8 years old and getting my blanket and shutting your bedroom door and laying in front of your bedroom door so nobody would go into your bedroom while you were sleeping. So if somebody was trying to get into your bedroom, they'd have to step over me first. And so those things really stood out to me, and I just felt so much conviction and remorse and all that stuff that I just made a decision. I had already made that decision, but I also made a decision that I was not going to create a situation where I was victimizing my son again, because he made it very clear that if I got out and went back to that life, that he was not going to be in my life anymore. So I was done in my heart. And then, 2010 rolled around and I got parole. And I got out, and I struggled because back then, there was barriers, because I had a barrier crime, but there was also barriers for individuals that were convicted of a drug offense, couldn't get any public assistance, no food stamps. So I was like working a part-time minimum job. It took me 3 months to get the job when I got out. Thankfully, I had a friend that paid, a couple of weeks of rent for me, but I had, really worked hard to get a job. My first job was JCPenney. And I worked there part-time and, did really well, became a workaholic, and they actually made me full-time and put me in a commission sales. And then that's when I really started to understand the importance of a work ethic. And that helped me stay in recovery. And then I started understanding, like, oh, wow, like, I can be really good at my job if I put my all into it. And that's exactly what I did. I always put my all into whatever position I was doing for the place that I was working at. My son was still in foster care He requested to stay in foster care up until he was like 19 because he had diabetes. He got diabetes when he was 14. And but then he wanted out, and I found out why, and later realized that he had relapsed and he was using drugs again. And that stemmed from his failed relationship with his high school sweetheart. He was really devastated that they had broken up, and he was always calling me, asking me, "Mom, what do I do?" And realized that he just continued to like use drugs. And I tried everything possible to help him, and it was just really difficult, me being on the other end of it, and fearful of what was going to happen to my son, and telling him, you know that this life is not good, you know where it can end up. You can end up in jail, or people are unpredictable, because I lived that life, and I saw how you have to be like super brutal to live that life. And my son was not brutal. He was super gentle and kind and sweet, and always like would help people. Me, on the other hand, I was brutal, so I was a total opposite of him. So I was just like, you're not, you're not hard, and I'm always fearful of what's going to end up happening to you. And fast forward, he kept getting arrested, and I'm like, had to set boundaries with my own son and tell him, you can't stay with me if you're going to be using, which was very hard for me. But I gave him options, and he chose to move out and get high. Then he gets arrested, and first person he calls is me. And of course, I'm there to help him. And April 22nd, of 2015, he was arrested at a hotel in Palmer. And he gets out. He tells me, I'm glad that I was arrested. I'll get clean and sober. He would send text messages to me prior to that saying, I hate this. I don't like looking at myself in the mirror. And I understood what he was saying because I lived that life. I understood that he was in a place where he didn't like his addiction. And so when he got out, when they released him, I was like, okay, you're sober, you can come back home. So I let him come back, and he was there maybe a month and a half, and I started realizing that he was hiding in his room, and I suspected that he was using again. And once I confronted him about it, we'd fight and argue, and I'd just be like, I'll help you. What do you want? And unfortunately, that help, he didn't take that help because he believed he could do it on his own, which a lot of people that have an addiction issue think that they can do things on their own without having that, help along the way. So I ended up confronting him continuously. And then June 22nd, he left the house, and he was said that he had a job building fences and that he would see me that evening. And I just remember specifically having a conversation with him and telling him, hey, you have to make sure you clean your bedroom and do the dishes, and I'll clean or clean your bathroom and do the dishes, and then I'll do the rest of the house. And I texted him that night on my way to work and said, hey, all the chores are done, so when you get home, just do this, because I had the 700 Club showing up the next morning, which was June 23rd, and they were going to do my testimony. And he never responded. I got home, he wasn't there. And instantly I was like, this isn't right. So I called his phone. It was off. And I kept, I texted him again and again. Then the next morning at 7:30, I tried again. And then the 700 Club showed up. I did my testimony, but the whole time I'm recording with them, in my mind, I'm thinking, where's my son? Why isn't he responding? This is not like him not to respond. And why is his phone off? And I was trying to come up with these scenarios of why he was not, maybe he is out of range, or he chose to spend the night at a friend and he didn't have his phone charged or something. And I go to Anchorage, and on my way back to Anchorage in that afternoon, I was like, the last text I sent him, if you don't respond, I'm going to the police. And he didn't. You know, I was trying to really wrap my head around the fact that my son was gone. And I was like, he's diabetic. Was it his diabetes? He was did he overdose? And he said, no, it was a suspicious death. And he really didn't give me details. But when he said suspicious, I knew instantly that he'd been murdered.
Did you want revenge at all, or did you go right to what was your thought process when thinking about who hurt your son or who murdered your son?
Because having a victim mentality would send me back to and give me a reason to have an excuse. And excuses are a lot of the reasons why people end up relapsing. And so that was not going to be my excuse. That's when I started learning about what restorative justice. I didn't know what the term was as far as like the world, but then that's when I understood, I understood scripture and I understood the justice of God, but I understand the terminology. You know what I mean?